God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. By the time you're watching this, it will be Friday evening, and I hope that you all are looking forward to your weekend. I've got a little bit of a head start. I'm already visiting my in-laws 400 miles from my home, but I have this video that I found while browsing the YouTubes on Wednesday. It's called Guns Explained with Cats. And I thought about going through and doing a careful analysis of all the different phrases that this guy is going to use to do this analogy that he wants to do. But I decided to just skip that part. I thought it might get pretty boring. So here you go. Here is your master cipher. This is your Little Orphan Annie decoder ring. Every time the guy says the word cat, you need to hear the word gun. And there's a few other key words and phrases in here that I thought I would go ahead and translate, because when they come up, it's either stop and do the analysis myself or just give it to you right away. So he said he likes the phrase claw in the face. I don't know if it's something about the way that he says it that he likes or the way it rolls off his tongue, but he likes the phrase claw in the face. And it roughly translates to get shot by a gun. The person doesn't apparently matter in the situation. It's all about the gun. There's this character in the video called Mrs. Nra. It's quite obviously the NRA. There's a reference made to piles of treats, which I can't figure out. This guy must know something about the NRA that I don't. And then there's lions, tigers, and cheetahs, which he explicitly in the video equates to assault weapons, and not just assault rifles, but assault weapons, the definition as applied by the Clinton administration. Not in as many words, but he says lions, tigers, cheetahs, AR-15s. So I'm making the connection to assault weapons there. So let's get into it. I'm just going to rant a little bit. I've got a few planned talking points that I want to talk about. Those tabs don't matter. So yeah, strap in. Let's go for a ride. I hope that you can hear it. Real quickly, my computer recordings hardware is not very good. If I turn the video up anymore, it's going to blow your eardrums out. Or at least it blows mine out just listening to it. So here we go.
If you're still not sure what to do about guns, let me explain it to you using this awful cat.
Now I'm going to pause right here, and I'm going to point out something really quick. Okay, we're going to talk about analogies. Just because you have a nice analogy, an analogy that everybody gets and understands, it doesn't mean it's correct. Just because you are good at telling this analogy and illustrating this analogy, this guy is a very talented animator, quite obviously in my opinion, at least compared to me. But just because you have an analogy that you think is the bomb.com, is the best thing since sliced bread, doesn't mean it's actually a good analogy. And here's why. You're comparing an inanimate object to an animate object. Already you're in danger of doing something that is going to invalidate your comparison. People use inanimate objects as metaphors for characteristics all the time. You might call a person a rock, and you could be saying that in a physical sense, you could be saying that in a metaphorical sense. The person is steadfast, they're resolute, they can't be moved. But when you're going to compare two objects, is essentially what we're doing. We're comparing an object, a cat, to another object, a gun. And you're going to say that these things are effectively the same thing for the sake of the analogy. They have to be very consistent. And there's one glaring inconsistency between a cat and a gun that you can't get away from. And it's going to become painfully obvious as we continue to watch this video. But a cat is an animate object. A cat can do things of its own volition. A gun is an inanimate object. A gun cannot do anything unless an animate being does something with the gun. I have at least two guns. yeah, I have two guns. I have multiple knives in this apartment. I could get my gun. I could put it on the bed here next to me, fully loaded, point the gun at myself, arm the trigger and the hammer, prepare the weapon to fire. And as long as I didn't touch the trigger, it would not shoot me. As long as something catastrophic didn't fail within the firearm and I didn't pull the trigger, I would not get shot. I would be perfectly safe, just me and the firearm pointed directly at me. Now, if I had a feral cat and I tried to bring it in here and put it on the bed and leave it alone, it's a very different situation because a feral cat can do things on its own. So the analogy is already starting to break down.
Now, before we start, we can all agree that banning cats...
You know what? I'm going to speed things up in these parts where I'm going to let him talk for a long time.
Won't get rid of all cats. And that a majority of people that do own cats are good people. Not every cat is an awful cat. And I happen to love a cute, cuddly cat. Ah, look at you. So cute. Such a cute...
Okay, here comes a part that I want to comment on.
little kitty. Stupid, awful cat!
Okay, what's the difference between this cat that the guy likes and this cat that's about to attack him? Could there be a difference in the way these cats were treated? Could there be a way? Let's start to try and bring the analogy home. Could there be a difference in the way that these two cats are handled? To be blunt and over the head, could it be that the gentle cat is being handled with care, with respect for its capabilities, with caution, knowing that mishandling this cat could cause it to fly into a rage and claw people in the face? Could it be that the feral cat is not being handled in those ways? Could it be that the feral cat is being handled by a person that is handling the feral cat with intent to harm? But that's not explored at all in this video. Here, watch.
Stupid, awful cat! That was an awful cat. And that is what we're here to talk about. Let's say...
We're not talking about the environments surrounding the cats. Again, every time you hear the word cat, you're supposed to hear gun in this video. We're not talking about the environment surrounding the cat, the way that it's being handled, the purpose in which it's being handled. We're just talking about the cat. And that is another place where the analogy begins to break down. A gun is not going to fly through a window and shoot me. I could take my firearm, put it outside the window, come back inside, sit down, fully loaded, ready to fire everything, and it's not going to jump through the window and shoot me in the face. It's not going to. A feral cat, if I tried to bring it in here and set it next to me and leave it alone, it might attack me. If your analogy breaks down in the real world, how do you expect it to apply in your analogy world? Let's keep rolling.
Say you're at the movies or church or school when out of nowhere a cat pops up and claws you in the face.
Same problem. A cat shows up out of nowhere and claws you in the face. A gun can't show up out of nowhere and attack anyone. A person has to be carrying the gun. And even if a person carried a gun into the movies or church or school and set it on the counter and said, "This is an assault weapon, it is very dangerous," and no one touched it, no one would die. I want you to realize how quickly the analogy crumbles and falls apart. Guns and cats are like, the cliche is apples and oranges. You're comparing two totally different things at this point.
Suddenly, you might want to do something about this awful cat.
Yeah, you might want to do something about an autonomous thing that can attack and hurt people. You might want to do something about autonomous people that are going to use cats to attack people. You might want to do something about the people that are using guns to inflict pain. If you do something about the gun, What's the person going to do? If you take the gun away from a violent person, what's a violent person going to do? They'll find a different weapon. They might find a different gun. This guy's saying that there are good, cute cats and mean, evil cats. So if you took away all the mean, evil cats, but you didn't do anything about the violent people, they're going to take the good, cute cats and turn them into violent, evil cats.
Now, I live on a street that had one awful stray.
This is a totally, totally ridiculous part of the analogy. I cannot stress to you how insane this moment right here in the video is.
A cat. And when no one did anything about it, one cat turned into dozens, and they were all clawing people.
I'm doing the Picard double facepalm right now. If you leave a gun alone, it does not multiply. Guns do not procreate. Why you decided to tell this as part of your story, I will never understand. Because if you're going to say, how is a gun like the feral cat in this instance? How does one bad gun turn into dozens of bad guns on your street if it's left alone? The only way that that happens is if there's a bad person at the center of the bad guns. And then the question becomes not what do we do about the guns, it's what do we do about this person? And again, this is another place where the analogy is falling apart. Right before our eyes. We're 49 seconds into the video and the analogy has been obliterated.
In the face. And it's all because my neighbor, the crazy cat lady, Mrs. Nra, was leaving out giant piles of treats for cats. So you...
And here's something rough. Here's something... This is one of the things that makes me say, this guy is either actively engaged in a misinformation campaign, or he's terribly misinformed. You know what? We're going to look up another video real quick. You're going to get to see a piece of my browsing history here. Let's see. It was the CNN reporter shoots AR-15. Some of you may have seen this video. This is hysterical.
This is what an AR-15 sounds like.
If you've ever... I've seen this 3 times and it never gets less funny. If you've ever fired a rifle before, you know that this is an imbecile. You know that this is a guy that has never laid hands on a firearm before. You know he has no earthly idea what he's doing. This is a guy that is totally uninformed. But he's here with this guy behind him. This guy behind him, you're going to see in a moment, obviously knows what he's doing with a firearm. Let me see if I can't skip to the point. Yeah, okay, here we go. What we skipped here. Okay, well, you can see his name there. This is Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, retired U.S. Army. This is a guy that knows his way around a firearm.
Soldiers. If you're a gun collector or a gun aficionado and you want an AR-15, you can certainly buy one, and you should be able to buy one. The problem is when it gets in the hands of the wrong people.
Originally,
this is a guy that knows what he's doing with a firearm.
Built for the battlefield, a defining...
He said if you're a collector and you want to buy an AR-15, you should be able to buy an AR-15. The problem is when they get in the hands of the wrong people. And that's all fine. That's all good things to say, but watch what he's about to say.
The main characteristic of the AR-15 is the speed and power of the bullet.
Now those are single shots. If I wanted to fire this on full semi-automatic,
that is the mark of somebody that is actively engaged in a disinformation campaign. This is a guy that knows what guns are, that knows what they're capable of, that knows how to handle a firearm. This is a retired Army lieutenant. And he just said the phrase full semi-automatic, which does not exist in the firearms world. Full semi-automatic is not a real thing. And this guy that knows that just said it. This man on the right in the black shirt is actively engaged and a participant in a disinformation campaign. The guy on the left is just a useful idiot. He literally has no idea what he's talking about, and he's trusting this guy who's actively misinforming him to get his information. And so when we get to back to this guy, the animator, the question that I have is this guy engaged in a disinformation campaign, or is he misinformed himself? Because he said the NRA leaves out piles of treats for bad cats. And remember, cats are guns. So the NRA is leaving out an incentive of some kind to attract guns. And I want to ask the fellow that created this video, how do you get guns to appear and multiply? What does it take to make that happen? Could it be that there are market forces that demand that guns be available? Could it be that there are sociological forces that demand that people have powerful and easy-to-use tools at their disposal to defend themselves? This is a big question mark in the video for me. I don't understand what the Miss Nra character leaving out piles of treats is supposed to represent. I know Miss Nra is the NRA, but I don't know what the piles of treats are. My best guess is manufacturing incentives so that people will make more guns, but there are not people involved in this video besides the victims. As you have seen, we've seen victims. The guy gets attacked in his house by a rabid cat, and the guy at church gets attacked by a rabid cat. There are victims, and there are guns. And there is the NRA. Those are the characters in the play that's being put on by this guy. So I think he's just misinformed. Let's keep watching. You tell me.
You explain to your neighbor that maybe it would be okay to have a couple rules for these cats. Now, you would hope that a good neighbor would understand. But she freaks out and yells at you that you're trying to ban all cats.
Now, I want to show you this video over here. This is Dana Lash. I'm not assuming that the guy wants Mrs. Nra to represent Dana Lash. I'm sure Miss Nra is just a cat person, is just the old cat lady character blended with a little bit of NRA. But he's now saying that the NRA is totally opposed to any rules governing firearms. And I want you to hear what the spokeswoman for the NRA in 2018 said in regards to certain people being able to purchase firearms.
I don't believe that this insane monster should have ever been able to obtain a firearm.
Does that sound like somebody that doesn't want any rules governing firearms? Does that sound like, does this Miss Nra, does Mrs. NRA sound like Mrs. Nra? I don't know who this character is. I think it's just a misinformed version of the NRA that this guy doesn't know about.
You're just like, hey, I just don't want to get clawed in the face. I'm not banning anything. And they tell you maybe if you had your own cat, you'd feel better about it. And
now, if you would, give me a second to explain why owning a gun makes you think differently about guns. Most of the time, I would say most people that own a gun were exposed when they were younger to guns, so they're not terrified, abjectly terrified of firearms. The other kind of people that own guns are the kind of people that were victimized and now they have a gun to protect themselves. These are the kind of people that are real staunch defenders of the Second Amendment, the kind of people that want to be able to protect themselves, that don't want to have to rely on the federal government. So you'll excuse me if I sympathize with Mrs. Nra wanting people to be able to own firearms and actually encouraging people that know literally nothing about firearms to maybe do a little bit of personal research.
You say I do have a cat. It's that cute cuddly one in my window. Meow. That's not the
Yeah, it's the pea shooter in the window. I don't have a gun that's actually worth using. Never mind.
problem. The problem is these.
God damn it!
So as you can see, we have a cat problem. And all.
Except that we don't have a gun problem. You have manufactured a cat problem and you've done a good job, but it's not translating to guns because again, this cat that just attacked you, this gun that just attacked you had to have a person wielding it. This is not a gun attacking you by itself.
Again, damn it! So as you can see, we have a cat problem. And all anyone wants is to put some rules in place to stop the excessive amount of awful cats on.
And we have rules in place. They govern the awful people that are wielding the gun because guns aren't cats.
The street. But instead, I'm looking out my window and see an even bigger, scarier lions, tigers, cheetahs, and AR-15. That's not.
And there's where the lions, tigers, and cheetahs get equated to assault weapons. And this is where, this is another place where I think the guy is just misinformed. Because if you do research into what exactly assault weapons are, especially what the definitions of assault weapons are, you come to understand that assault weapons are not really more dangerous and deadly than other kinds of firearms, especially when you say semi-automatic firearms. All semi-automatic firearms are basically assault weapons. Some of them just look scarier than the other ones.
It's not the same as a regular cat. But my crazy cat lady neighbor wants you to think it's okay for everybody to own a cheetah.
Now, this is only a what moment if you don't know that assault weapons are just scary looking weapons. This is only a what moment. And there actually, you know what, let's move ahead because there's another point where I think it's fair to say that he's saying lions, tigers, and cheetahs are assault weapons and not weapons of war, machine guns, light machine guns, submachine guns, etc.
What? No. Would you stop it, Mrs. Draw? Really? And sure, there are people out there with the proper knowledge and training to understand the
So this is a strange moment for me. This almost looks like it's a guy trying to conflate assault weapons with military-grade weaponry. Because he's saying there are people out there that are qualified to handle military-grade weaponry. And then he says this.
Responsibilities of owning a cheetah, but when the cheetahs keep ending up in schools clawing kids in the face, I don't think the answer is to put more cheetahs in the school.
And this is a moment where I think it's fair to look at some statistics. He specifically channeled school shootings, but he's also channeled, common violence that happens in movie theaters, churches, school. He's channeled violence that happens in the streets. He's, from a certain angle, channeled even gang violence. So let's look at some FBI statistics, and let's look at some statistics from 2016. And to help, I've assembled this chart. And I'm zoomed out so that you can see the scope of everything, because when I zoom in, these words down here at the bottom are going to become clear. And what you're going to find is the category of weapon that is used overwhelmingly the most in homicides is a handgun. Rifles, shotguns, and other guns, all combined, don't even touch handguns. In fact, when you can see the top of the handgun bar and read the handgun word, you cannot even see the rest of the graph. It's literally not comparable. 15,000 homicides in 2016, 11,000 of which were committed by handguns. The assault weapons that you've described must, by the virtue of the way that handguns are used, must include handguns. And I would assume that handguns are the cute guns that you've been fawning over for this entire video.
I don't think the best way to buy a cheetah is to walk into Petco and go, hey, I want a cheetah. Oh, okay, here you go. And
Now, if he's saying that cheetahs are assault weapons, which I think he is, Petco doesn't do this. Petco runs a background. For one, Petco doesn't sell pets. They sell things that you need to take care of pets. So Petco sells the holsters, the ammo, the slings, the accessories. Petco doesn't sell the cats. On the other hand, if Petco did sell the cats, you would have to have a background check. You would have to pass the background check. You would have to not be a felon. You would have to not be registered in the background check system. You would not be able to buy specific weapons of war, like military grade weapons. So if you're saying a cheetah is a military grade weapon, Petco's absolutely under no circumstances going to sell you a cheetah. If you're saying a cheetah is an assault weapon, they're not just going to say, oh, okay, here you go, like in that charitable voice that you gave to them.
I think we all can agree that it's impossible to get rid of all cats. Which is good, because there's tons of cute, cuddly ones. But let's make some rules that limit and prevent how many awful cats wind up on our street. Less awful cats means less people clawed in the face. Sure.
Now, again, if your definition of an awful cat is the scary black rifle that you channeled earlier in this video, you're not going to touch people getting clawed in the face by getting AR-15s off the street.
Sure, they still might get attacked by a dog or abducted by aliens, but let's handle this one problem at a time. And while this won't solve all cat problems, there's a good chance it'll help with a lot. Like, they had a similar cat problem over on Australia Street, and after they put rules in place, good people still owned good cats, but no one has gotten clawed in the face in over 20 years.
I did not mean to push that button. This is a weird moment for me. No one has been killed by a gun in Australia in 20 years. No one has been killed by a gun in Australia in 20 years. No one has been killed by a gun in Australia in 20 years. Yet, firearm violence in Australia is only down, at best, 50%. That would be like saying, we went from 7,000 handgun deaths to 3,500. That means no one's been clawed in the face in 20 years. I'm doing the Picard facepalm, not the double this time, just the single. This is why I think that the guy is grossly misuninformed. That's not even a word. Grossly uninformed. Somebody either didn't do his research, is relying exclusively on the mainstream media for their information. That's the long and short version of the video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this one. The weekend is upon us, and this is the last video that you've had to watch to get to the end of the weekend. I hope that the quality was okay. One of the reasons that I shifted from my computer to my recording on my phone was because the sound quality improved. The video quality also improved a little bit. I tried to update OBS right before I recorded this video. Maybe that helped a little bit with it. We'll see. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. If you want to see more videos like this one, come back next time. It'll be on Monday as we do a new report. Until then, good night, have a great weekend, and God bless.